So here's the body, all clean, all the grease and filth gone from it, and all ready for reassembly. We haven't done anything with the front of the camera yet and the shutter assembly. Typically I would deal with the body first and get that back into good condition and ready to go. Put it to one side and then start on the shutter, just so I haven't got 2.5 truckloads of parts scattered on the bench all at the same time. So we'll put the shutter aside for the moment. I'll start with the film advance shaft. Now I've got some grease here. This is a molybdenum based or a molybdenum enriched grease, which I like for this particular job because it's quite tacky. I put it on that shaft, it stays on the shaft, it doesn't get pushed out. So I'm pulling back this bush with my fingernails so I can get underneath it, get some on the shaft, and then just work that backwards and forwards and check that the shaft is coated. It feels good. I don't use that particular grease for much, but I find it good for that purpose because it stays where it's put. This is some synthetic grease. It's called Inox. If you can't find it in your country, I'm not surprised. That's the way life goes. I'm running it into the spring. And on these cam surfaces here, I'm just running some on there, top and bottom. Alright, that can go back in the camera. Here's our take-up spool. This is plastic, of course. You'll be a bit cautious about what you use cleaning it. I find that Naphtha works fine. I don't clean it with anything more energetic than that. And you just want to get rid of any old grease that's gone up the tube and the inside. Here's our camera body. Open the back. Put the take-up spool in place. Slot side up. Flip the camera back over. Here's our advance shaft. Now, on the inside of the advance shaft you've got this plate here. This is where it gets fixed to the camera body. Make sure that the holes line up, otherwise you won't be able to get this thing screwed in easily. Where do we want this? Well, if it was a rangefinder camera, we'd start right there. This position is where the lock lever drops in. We'd start right there, fix our screws, and then when we put the advance lever on, we'd pre-tension this one full turn. One full turn's not enough for one of these reflex cameras. There's too much drag in the mechanism. So you want a full turn and a third. So I'll just pull my lock release lever out of the way, and I'll advance this, or retard it really, a third of a turn to there. Take my 3 screws that'll fix it in place. These are the nickel plated screws, identical to the ones that hold the base plate to the camera. Run them down. Don't finally tighten up the screws until you've got all 3 in position. Otherwise you can be sure that one of the screws, the first screw you tightened up, will have displaced the plate slightly and you won't be able to line its mates up. They're all in place now. They've all been run down. I can tighten those 3 screws up. At this point there's no tension on here at all, but we're about 1 1/3 of a turn retarded from the rest position. The rest position would be, let's move it around, right there, where the lock lever would drop down. I'll show you the lock lever. This is the lock lever. That would sit right there, and it would lock the film advance from being able to move if it had dropped down. Of course, it's held up by the frame counter most times. Put that to one side. So we have that in position. You can check that the take-up spool moves easily. That all looks nice and smooth. While we've got the camera this side up, the base of the camera, good time to put the tripod socket back on, because otherwise you'll soon get sick of this. Every time you press on the top of the camera, the door opens. So put the tripod socket back on nice and early. Here's the insert that drops in. That's to guide the film cassette. Obviously it drops down into the hole. 3 screws. The screws are fairly distinctive. They've got a plain section right at the top, and there are 3 of them, and they should all look the same. As usual, get 3 screws in position, then tighten them up. That'll make life much more convenient. Door doesn't instantly spring open now. Okay, so more of the film advance stuff. Well, first thing we've got to do is assemble the clutch. And the clutch is important because its job is to provide some slippage, so that as the film builds up on the take-up spool, its effective diameter is increasing all the time. And so if the take-up spool and the sprocket shaft were locked together, then in practice what would happen is they'd be fighting. The take-up spool would be trying to pull more film through the camera than the sprocket was willing to feed, and the sprocket holes would get ripped to bits. And that problem is defeated by having a clutch in the system, and this is the clutch. It allows for some limited slippage so that the take-up spool and the sprocket shaft don't have to work locked together. Right, so I'm taking some of my grease. This is the grease with molybdenum in it, the sticky stuff. And I just wipe that a generous coating around the inside of the outer part of the clutch. So taking the inner part of the clutch here, and you'll see there's a little notch in it. Here's the spring that couples the components together. That little tab on the spring must drop into the notch. I use these pliers. They're crimp lug pliers, they're round jaws, and basically with this held in one hand, that notch sitting in the hole, squeeze these up lightly, then rotate this with my fingers to pull the spring inwards. Put it down on the bench, put the outside of the clutch in place, and there we have it. Now the clutch will be smoother to move in one direction than the other. That's normal, and that's by design, and the smooth direction is the direction it's going to need to move. So it's all very good and lucky for us. Taking some of my synthetic grease, I'm just going to give a wipe through the inside of this. Bring the camera back into the picture. Drop this in. The 2 wee tangs on the bottom of that should drop in and engage the take-up spool. So now that's sitting in place. Next component, this. This is the top bush for the film advance shaft. It's got this little gear set on here. These are on a common shaft, riveted together. You can't get this thing to bits. Once it's been through the cleaner and there's no lubrication in there at all, it can be a bit rough in its action. It feels dry. Taking some synthetic grease, I'll put a good dollop in here. Taking my big fat finger, I'll squeeze that, and the hydraulic pressure will force that grease in underneath those two little gears. That's all moving nicely now. So I'll give this a wipe with a bit of synthetic grease through the centre. Bring the camera body back into the picture. Fit this over the top. You may want to rotate the gear so that this seats down over the shaft. This gear at the bottom here, that will be engaging with the teeth on the outside of the clutch assembly. That's how it couples to that. Let's get its fixings in place. This camera's blinking at me. I think its battery is very, very tired. I'll just have to pause here and change batteries. Okay, getting everything in place here. A single screw goes at the back. It's facing towards you, the back this time. I'm doing this back to front just for fun. Normally I have the camera facing in the other direction, so I'll just have to reverse what I do. Next piece, this little bush. This little bush is flat on one face, it's countersunk on the other. The flat face must be up. If you have the countersunk side up, things are not going to go well for you. Alright, the pawl goes on like this. Taking the screw, I'll put a touch of synthetic grease at the top. Run the screw down. Check that that pawl moves freely. It's not trapped by the screw head. That looks good. And then we'll fit its return spring in place. That was just a bellbird singing out there. Okay, let's get this spring in position. It goes over the screw that we've just fitted. The long arm goes against the body here and the short arm presses against that little ratchet, that pawl. Okay, so lift that leg over there. That's it. So this pawl is pushed towards the centre by the spring. That's all looking good. Just snug those two screws up. Alright, carrying on with this film advance. This is the next piece to go on. I'll just give that a wipe of synthetic grease on the inside. You don't need to go mad doing that. Put this in here. If I rotate this clockwise from here, it should push that pawl out of the way and drop into position just like that. Now I'm just going to check the position of my film advance, make sure it's where I left it in the apparently neutral position where the lock lever would be. This is typically where I position stuff when I'm assembling the lock. You can put it any one of 4 ways really, so it suit yourself on that. This piece here goes on. And look at the shape of that, see the way that hooks round there. This piece, this is the little pawl that drives that gear here. I'll move that gear around one more notch and allow this to swing out. And this centre piece here, the square you see on the top, drives this component in course in turn drives this little dog, and this little dog drives the gear around the outside. Now we have to get its spring in position. This is usually fairly entertaining. Okay, here's the spring. It's pretty small and it's pretty awkward to deal with. And I think my tweezers are a bit magnetised, so they don't help. It goes down into this little groove here. And just tucks in there. So one arm of it's against the face of this component, one arm of them is against that dog. I'm just checking to make sure the spring is sitting where I expect it to. Yes, that looks fine. And here's the cover plate. That can go on. Now, inevitably there'll be some scuff marks on there from where the cocking rack's been. That's not significant. If you want to make it look like no one's ever been in here, the scuff mark starts at the front here. Here is the gear. It will drive the cocking rack. I'll just take a look at that gear closely, make sure there's no deformation of the teeth, and if there is, we can position the bad teeth where they'll never come in contact with the cocking rack. No, that looks fine. No problem with that at all. So the gear goes over the top of the shaft, and at this stage the top of that squared shaft and the inside face of that wheel, that gear, are just about level with each other. Yeah. This screw. This goes on the top here. And I'll see if I can, my tweezers are not at a convenient angle. I'll run that screw down without displacing that gear. That's fine. Okay, so that went well. Now I'm going to put that lock lever in at the bottom and hold it, that lock lever, while I tighten this screw up. So I've got something to work against. That's it. So I'm holding that in place at the bottom. The film advance shaft now can't move. So I get my screwdriver and nip that screw up. Don't go mad, it's not a particularly large screw, but it looks impressive from the top, but there's not much meat there. Okay, we'll take our lock lever back out, we don't need that there at the moment. So we've got all the stuff on the film advance shaft in place. And we can roll this sprocket round with my thumb. You'll see the gear here. And this gear couples, this one here couples to the sprocket shaft. Okay, so far so good. And I think sprocket shaft and a rewind catch can go in next. So I'll do the rewind catch, I think. Let's get this round here. Find its return spring. I've got multiple containers here with different parts in them, because some have been through the cleaner and some have not. Right, so what do I want for this? I want some molybdenum paste, which I've got in this container. And this is the catch for the rewind, and that curved end on it. Just running a little bit of molybdenum paste on there, and because I've got this in my hand I'll run it through the pivot point too. And this slides into the body under there. The round end goes under the film advanced component. It's return spring. This will go over there. So one arm of it is against this face of the body. The other arm's end's just floating at the moment. We'll hook it into place shortly. And the screw. The screw is a shoulder screw. There's two shoulders on that screw. One that the spring can sit round and one that the lever can pivot around. And you need to make sure that the lever is pivoting on that shoulder and not trapped underneath it. That all looks good. Now, got to get this loose end of the spring lifted up and behind the arm at this point. So I'll do this a bit left-handed, and let's see if we can arrange things so that you can see what's happening. So I'm just going to hold the arm back over there, lift up the end of the spring, swing it across and hook it behind there. So now we have this sprung loaded, and we can move on to putting the sprocket shaft in place. So the film sprocket goes in, there's a slot at the top, and that goes at the top. Don't put it the other way up, you'll discover that that doesn't work well. So that just goes in position right here in the body. And the sprocket shaft, I'm going to lubricate that lightly with some synthetic grease. The upper part of the shaft there, the lower part of the shaft there, and I normally just wipe a little bit on the teeth for good measure. That slides down into the body right here, goes down through the sprocket shaft, the sprocket, and comes out at the bottom of the camera. Now, you may need to pull that around with your tweezers to line it up. If I swing this arm back and I've got my finger on the top of that shaft, it pushes it into place. You can see it's engaged here, the gears are engaged. Now, we want to get the screw in place that drives the sprocket from the sprocket shaft, and there's the hole, I can just see it in the shaft there. And the screw we want is this little wee one right here. So let's see if we can get this in place without it being a fight. You may find this goes in easier from one direction than the other, because one side of the shaft may have a lead in or a countersink on it that the screw picks up on easily, and the other side might be plain. So if it won't start on one side, just rotate the shaft 180 degrees and come in from the other side. That went in fine, no arguments at all. So our shafts are now linked together through the clutch. So if I hold this with my finger, I can move this wheel with the clutch, just the slip of the clutch. Right, so that's all together. At the base of the camera, we'll want our rewind button in place. So we've got three pieces. We've got the washer, the rewind button, and its return spring, which is quite a coarse spring. You won't mix it up with anything else. I normally run some synthetic grease through that spring, put the button through the spring, take the washer, run that onto the button, and then screw it onto the shaft. So I'm holding my finger on the top here so the shaft doesn't push back out of the way, and I'll get that screw started just with finger and thumb. Now I'm checking that the button can be depressed. In other words, the button passes through the washer, that the washer's not trapped on the shoulder of the screw, and that's all good. Now I want to tighten that thing up. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I've got these pliers that have been mutilated just to do this job, and all I do is hold the shaft, the sprocket with my thumb, do it up with the pliers. You'll know when it's tight enough because your thumb will hurt. And that's all that's required there. So we have our rewind button in place, the film advance shafts in place, the sprocket shafts in place, and that's that 50% of our film advance stuff all there and ready to go. I'm going to put the return spring for the capping plate in now. It goes in this hole. And normally that's held in place by the base plate when the base plate's fitted to the camera. Of course there's no base plate on there at the moment. So I'm just going to take a piece of adhesive tape. I think I've got a piece right here that'll do the job. Just put that right over the top there, that'll hold that down nicely. Well, it would do if the adhesive was any good. Let me wipe that surface clean and have another go. Let's have another go. I'll try not to get the tape over the top of that screw hole. That's better. I'll trim that excess off down there, which I don't need. Okay, so that tape is now holding that spring in place, and that means that the capping plate mirror, let's release this. The capping plate mirror catch down the bottom here is now sprung loaded and will work normally. See, that latch is in place. So I just put that in now just because it makes it more convenient at this stage. Okay, we'll carry on with the assembly. I'm going to put the frame counter in next. Get the frame counter components together. And its screw, which is not as happy as it once was, but it'll do nicely. Okay, so the wavy washer, I'll just give that a wipe of synthetic grease, top and bottom. Put it over that component. Put that component into the camera, and what we're interested in is this larger cutout here, because that larger cutout is where the latch lever, the end of film lever, will drop into place like that. So we need to know its orientation, and here's the disc with the numbers on it, and we want number 1 to be facing the back of the camera. It should just sit on there like that. I'll just give that a light wipe of synthetic grease through the centre. Here's the cover, and we can run the screw in there. Not doing that up tight yet, because we've got to get our spring in here. This little triangle should be pointing directly to the back of the camera. Right, let's see about getting this spring in place. That goes into the slot here, and I'll pull that down there so we can get this arm into place. And the arm itself, I'll just give that a light wipe with some synthetic grease on the underside. Slide it in under here. And now I want to get this spring hooked up to that notch on that little arm. So might have to lift this end up and lift that spring. Right, the spring's now pushing this arm this way. Run that screw down, and you can get to the counter wheel here. Check that it moves. Seems to move well enough. If it's too stiff in its action, then it means that the lever that operates the counter is likely to cause us problems. I think that's okay. Okay, let's bring the counter around to number 1. The lever should drop in. Dropped in right there. So that means I just want to move this disc across slightly so that that number lines up better. Okay, so that's the frame counter back in the camera. That's good. Now we're going to need some more pieces to go in here. This is the spring for the lever that operates the counter, that moves the counter one notch forward each time. I'm just tensioning that and tucking it in there. This spring acts to push the lever this way. Here's the lever that we want, and again I'll take some synthetic grease, just run some on the underside, run some on the tip of that counter, swing that into there like that, and we want this spring hooked onto that little notch there on the arm. That looks good, so that when the film advance is swung, this tab hits this, pushes that arm that way, makes the counter move. It seems to work. The lock lever can drop into place. Here's our lock lever. A little wipe of synthetic grease in there, some on the underside of that where it couples to this. Drop that thing into place. Here's our advanced lever. Let's move that round to the start position. Lift that out. Unhook this for a minute. Let's take that lever out. Our advance here, this needs to be, that's its start position. That's about a third of a turn of tension. We need to advance that another full turn clockwise. That's sitting there tensioned up now. We can drop this latch lever in. If we move our counter to number 1, that'll drop into place. We'll do that in a second. Let's get this lever in. spring's hooked up. Just removing this repeatedly. Okay, it's just latched in at number 1. That would allow this to drop down. That's all seated in place there. We've got one long thin spring that fits in here. The other one, of course, we've got under the tape here, so that's not running away anywhere. And at this stage we need a base plate before we can sort of carry on with it. I've got the base plate for this camera is here, but I've got one I've prepared to help me repair cameras, and basically it's a standard base plate with the front edge notched out along here so that you can get the front of the camera on easily. So I'll find that and put that on instead.